So I'm calling it like the mean and social pleasantness.
Yeah.
What would you call it?
Yeah, that's a good one. I
Yep.
don't think the middle part has a name really. I think the
Yeah.
extremes have a name, right? Yeah.
So this virtue governs how agreeable we are in social life. So the virtuous person is pleasant and agreeable, but not a sycophant. Sycophant,
Yeah.
right? They're not, they will disagree, they will push back, they will have their own opinions, right? They're willing to cause discomfort when it's warranted and by disagreeing and not always just saying yes. And but yeah, they don't make it a point necessarily to be contrarian, right? So it's they're trying to there's a middle ground there where they're not abrasive, contrarian, and they're also not a sycophant. And so the excess of this would be people pleasing, never disagreeing, flattering, obsequent.
Obsequious.
Thank you. I could try that 10 times and I'm not going to get it. Yeah.
You get it on sycophant.
Yeah. We'll stick with sycophant, which I barely got out. And then the deficiency is
Yeah.
quarrelsomeness or grumpiness, right? It's disagreeing for the sake of disagreeing. And I know those people. I don't know if you do, but they're always finding fault. And sometimes it's because they have to be right and they can't not be wrong. This is my experience. That's my perspective of sharing of why these people might be that way. But those are the two ends of the meme. Is that what would you add?
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head right there. I think there is when it comes to these social virtues, it is about causing pleasure or pain to others in a social setting. So the obsequious person or the sycophant really is bringing about inordinate amounts of pleasure to the people they are hanging out with, but for really no ulterior motive. If you tell somebody, if you give somebody a compliment, you're trying to curry favor. That's You're trying to be nice. Now,
Mhm.
you could be nice to somebody because you feel like it'll make their day. You could be nice to somebody because you want to improve your relationship with that person. You could be nice to somebody because there's a business deal that you want to have with them or whatever. Of all the reasons, just flattering people because don't want to inflict any, you don't want to say the truth when you have to say the truth. This is not telling somebody, hey, you look good in that dress. This is saying that whatever choices they are making in life are the right choices to make. It is like Epstein's buddies sending him cards on his birthday saying, yeah man, Lolita this and that, right? That was the great
Right.
way to go ahead in your life. That is obsequiousness. Those are flatterers. Some of those people are twisted men who also had the same proclivities. But a
That's
lot of
right.
these other folks who wanted the Peter Attias of the world and all these guys who wanted to get somewhere, they are that's where the problem lies. When you're being obsequious to somebody who's doing something really terrible and you're not saying anything. But even in that case, maybe they had an ulterior motive. The ulterior motive was to get something from the guy. Those are flatterers or obsequious folks. And then you're right, there is this whole contentious class, which is, look, I have found myself in those situations at times, right? Someone says something, the only way to get a conversation going is to put a counterpoint. That's the advocati diaboli, like the devil's advocate, right? Like you say, you
Uh-huh.
know what, I get that, great. However, and that is different than the person who's constantly picking faults with everything that is being said. They can't accept, it's not like they're holding on to a position. It's not like you're for gun rights or against gun rights. It is basically you're just against everybody in the world. That's a difficult person to kind of hang out with. The person in the middle is the person who chooses, who rightly, they'll make the right choice about when to bring about pleasure or when to compliment somebody, or when to commend them for certain actions, and similarly will also rightly know when to cause pain, when to push forward, when to push against, make the right argument against. And that, I think, therein lies, like, you have to stand somewhere.
Yes.
in this equation, even somebody who is very diplomatic, I've seen people like that who will never say anything bad about anybody. And those people are actually well liked, by the way. The
Right.
obsequious
Yeah.
person is well liked by everybody. But you know that this obsequious person, everybody says the same thing, man. This person probably has no spine. Social virtues come down to kind of this honor thing. I think you can find people on both sides of the spectrum. In this, really, I think it's equidistant. I've seen contentious people who just argue for no other reason apart because they're highly egotistical and they believe they are or they're just
Right.
mad at the world. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with being sulky as well, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And then the other side of this, the obsequious person, I've seen them who are just, they don't want to take a stand. They are so worried about conflict. And you see that in the workplace too. They'll just say yes to what everybody else is saying without putting a counterpoint up.
Yeah. Yeah, I have examples of people on the sycophant side who are sycophants because they're dealing with a person on the quarrelsome side. So the person is so quarrelsome that they're just going to agree with that person. Or you mentioned it, you said ego. There's something about that person that you just can't, you don't really have a choice. You have a great example right now, if you've ever watched a clip of the current cabinet meetings, of what that is
Yeah,
on those two sides.
yeah,
I can tell you, like, personal example too, by the way, is I worked in an environment where I worked for someone who was always right, always had to be right, and will argue just for the sake of argument. They will take the opposite side of what they believe just to be right and to argue against someone else's point. They also never liked feedback, and they didn't like you to share your opinion. So this is the only time I've ever been fired in my entire life. It's because I started sharing my opinion of saying, of basically calling it out and saying, well, this is how you see it, but this is actually what's happening. And doing that in front of other people, not a good move on my part.
yeah,
Yeah. And that's
yeah.
okay. It's not an
Yeah,
environment you want to be in anyways. But
no,
yeah.
no, because the opposite end of this, see, that's where it comes down to, right? Like virtue is a choice. It is voluntary action. One day you wake up and you say, do I'm knowingly doing this. And I know if you are in the situation and you didn't know that these things exist, that there is a choice. It's not, you don't have will or power to do it. That's a different situation. But once you
Right.
have will and you have power and you have knowledge of the particulars and you choose to be obsequious, you cannot say that you're walking on the path of eudaimonia. As a matter of fact, this is a great example of what we were saying before. That it is uncomfortable to stand up against a person like this.
Yeah.
Especially, it's uncomfortable to lose your job, to get fired. But that the path to eudaimonia requires one to do uncomfortable things inside of it. And while you're doing it, you're not happy inside of your life. That moment is not a positive feeling. But
Yeah.
later on, when you look back on it, it gives you an immense sense of self-respect. You learned something from that. And now when you read a chapter like this in the Nicomachean Ethics, you can say, you know what, I was in the middle state. I wasn't obsequious. That means, at least in this particular situation, I chose the action that was the virtuous thing to do, the middle state. That is, that's why virtue is aligned to eudaimonia, because you build self-respect along the way, the right kind of self-respect.
That's right. So what comes to mind here is actually one of the cardinal virtues, which is courage.
That's right.
You need to have the courage to actually choose the middle path here. So if you're not, and if you don't, what does that look like? And yeah,
Say more. That's fantastic.
well, I was going to say that. So you and I talked about this offline last week, but Sir Gawain in the Green Knight. I just watched the Green Knight version, the movie of that, and he has to make a decision, which is life or death. And if you choose death, that's actually the courageous decision. So it's different than what we're talking about right now with, but courage comes back to this, which is if he chooses life, it's the cowardly way. And they actually, in the movie, they go through 10 minutes of what his life, the rest of his life living as a coward would be. And then it comes back to, does he choose
I
death
see.
or does he choose life? Yeah.
You see, life doesn't give you that opportunity, but you can do that. You can actually have a little run forward and see what that feels like. Because if you live long enough, one has chosen the momentary happiness, chosen to move away from momentary discomfort, and it has come back to stay. It stays with you. It comes back to bite you. And next time you come upon that situation, you're like, no, I know what this feels like. I'm not going to choose this. And you choose something else which is harder to do, and you respect yourself for it. You stand by your morals. But in order for you to stand by your ethics, one has to know what your ethics are. In order to know
Mhm.
what your ethics are, one needs to have a philosophical toolkit. One needs to understand what ethics means. Most of my life, I walked around and I had no idea what this. I couldn't tell you what courage was. I can give you a definition of it. Couldn't tell you what happiness was. I couldn't tell you where self-respect came from. But now it's with these readings, I have a certain a post to which I've tied myself, and I know the direction. I know what I can come back to. I know the baseline. You see, that's the toolkit. That's the whole process of developing this, is to develop this kind of a toolkit.
You know what it is, and I could, yeah, we could talk about this for hours because I have another example too of just recently where courage has never been, and just using courage as an example here, but it's never been top of mind. I've never defined it just like you. And yet I was in a conversation last week where I'm met with a choice. And at the end of it, my answer was, I have to have the courage to do this. And if I don't, then shame on me because this is the courageous thing to do. And this is
There
the
we
right
go.
path to take. This
There
is
you
this
go.
is big life decisions here of making a
Right.
decision and saying, if I don't do this, I will be a coward for the rest of my life. This is the time. And this is big decisions, right? Life-changing decisions. And but I've never framed it that way before. But when you have this background in it, and you can bring this into these learnings and lessons into your life, it actually makes the decisions not easier, but you're more confident in the path that you choose because you know that you're taking a path and you know whether or not it's somewhere on that mean of courageous or of temperance or of anger. That's
And you cannot kid yourself anymore,
that's right. That's right. Yeah,
right?
no more
And
lying to
so
yourself. Yeah.
you cannot lie. You know if you're lying to yourself. So
Yeah.
and so you're right that one needs to be courageous to you take the middle state in between obsequiousness and contentiousness. It requires
Mhm.
courage. But the same thing is true for all the cardinal virtues. One has to be wise in order to know one is the right time, the right place, the right moment to do this. And so these cardinal virtues, one cannot say that, oh, this person has good temper and that's why they are virtuous. No. When one has courage, temperance, justice, wisdom, they will have good temper. They will
Mhm.
not be obsequious. You see what
Right.
I mean? That is the
Right.
person. And one never really gets the virtues. One walks in the direction. There's always a more courageous version of you. There's always a better, good tempered version of you, essentially.